triggers. And I will say, other than maybe, why is it not writing? Okay. Except I want 2 dashes in front of it. Other than maybe the subqueries, I think this is probably the most complex chapter. It's the most programming-like. That shouldn't panic you, hopefully. But one of the things they added to the SQL standards in the late 1990s was the ability to do some procedural things, to be able to kind of group things and run them, have some if structures and some where structures and things like that. So we're going to do this. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm kind of going to follow like the book does, is I'm going to go down and we'll look at under the public here. If you look under functions, there are a lot of functions, right? Most of these are pre-built. I'm going to just right-click on the create password one that I made. It's also in your some of you ran it for the cert tech cert one. But I'm just going to script it, and I'll script it as create. It'll open a new window. And I'm just doing this to get kind of a view of what a function looks like. This does a couple of things that I never wrote. It adds some defaults when you script it this way. So it's create or replace a function. It can go in any schema, right? Right now it's in public. I probably will make the functions today to go to public, but in real life, that's probably not where you want them to go because there are so many functions there. Your functions are going to get lost in the list, basically. So if you had a different schema for them, it makes it a little easier. You have to say what comes in. So this says pass character variable. What I said was pass varchar, right? So it does it more verbosely, but it returns text. This is important. For some of these, it's critical. There are different languages, and we're going to be using a couple. We're going to be using SQL, which is just straight SQL. And we're also going to be using, see if I can remember the initials, PLG, SQL, PLP. I think there's like 4. PLPG. Well, PLPG. I think it's Procedural Language Postgres. PLPG SQL. What language you use makes a difference in terms of how the function is arranged. The PLP or PLG, whatever, when we write it, I'll get it. I never get those initials quite right. Gives you things like if and where and those kinds of programming things, whereas the pure SQL is just SQL. You can also, although it's out of the scope of this class, you can write functions and procedures in Python, in C#, well, not in C#, C++, Java. There's like 5 different languages that Postgres supports for writing functions and stuff. So if you're writing something really complex, it might be worth thinking about a programming language other than the SQL, but we're going to stick with the SQL. Okay, there's a couple of things. Notice that it returns with an S. That is because it needs to, this is to differentiate it from the return, right? You have a return usually at the end of the function that returns a value. And this is to say what kind of value it's going to return. So most of them have a return statement. This one really doesn't the way they did it, although I think I wrote return, select crypt pass, and basically all of this is doing is just wrapping up the crypt function. So we're going to make, I'm going to go back to my other one. Are there questions on this?
Volatile.
I'm not sure what volatile is. I'd need to look that up. And the cost you don't have to worry about. So when you're weighing the cost there are some tools that you can do to analyze queries and indexes and stuff, and you can look at where the cost lies. And the cost is how much processor time of the whole. So 100% means this is all going to be executed by itself, and it'll incur 100% of the cost. This is not something you have to write in here, nor do you have to write volatile. I'm not sure why those are in there. Volatile, cost I understand, volatile I'm not sure. You want to look it up real quick? We can.
It means it can modify the database.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And this you don't have to do. This is again is scripting a default. By default, Postgres owns everything. Just as a aside, if you're setting up database security, and we might talk about this a little next week when we do the last one on admin, you want to disable Postgres. Because Postgres has access to everything, and Postgres, everybody knows Postgres as a user. Postgres has a default password of Postgres. So you want to disable that account, or at least change the password to something much more complex. Actually, our password for Postgres right now is password, right? The p@ssw0rd1. But that's not a great password for it. And it's actually probably better to really limit the account and then create an alternate admin rather than Postgres. But that's for future things. Let's write a simple function, a really stupid function, something that you would never use. But it'll give us a better sense of what's going on. So I'm going to basically do a function to cube a number. So I'm going to say create function, and we'll just call it, so we need to give it a name. You can do, just like with the others, you can do create or replace if you like. You have to tell it that it's a function, and you need to give it a name. And then it's going to take in a variable, which I'm going to call num, could call it number, and I'm going to say that it is an integer type. All right. So we are basically saying we're creating a function. The function is going to be called cube. I'm not sure why that's red. Is it a, it's probably a word, yeah, something in there. Something. It's a reserved word. There probably is already a function in there. Actually, I'm curious. Did I make a cube function already in here? I don't think so. We'll let it be.
What happens is it better to put another letter in front of it?
You might want to do my cube. I don't know. It's probably better not to have two functions with the same name, right? Although when I made it before, I didn't have a problem. So I'm going to do returns. So we have to say what kind of value does it return? And I'm going to return an integer. And then we do as. And I'm doing $2 here. There are lots of different things you can do here. Some people will do $body, and we might do that occasionally. You can do $2. Basically, you just need some marker of beginning and ending of the block. Right? And it doesn't have a built-in marker. You just make one. But this is really common, the double $, or $body,
You need to have the same end marker.
Yes, you do. The end marker has to be the same as your beginning marker. So in the cube, we're going to do this as, this could be as simple as SQL, but I will do it as the PLPG SQL. So if you do that, you have to have a begin end. When you do the the procedural language Postgres SQL. You have to do this. And I'm just going to do return. So this is return as opposed to returns, right? So I'm actually going to just do num times num times num, right? It said this is a really stupid function, but it'll give us the basic structures. And then I'm going to do end. And then I need to do the double. Oh, and this needs a semicolon. And the different statements inside need semicolons. And end needs a semicolon. And then the double things. And then I'm going to say language is PLP G SQL. I don't have any quotes here. I think it might work in quotes. Let's look and see if this function works. So it saved safely, correctly. If I refresh the function list, there should be a cubed function. Is it at the bottom? Why is it not in the list? Am I in the right?
You only have one scheme.
Well, that's fine. I only did it in public. Let's refresh at this level again.
Alphabetical under.
Yeah, I think it's
My
like,
cube.
it's an M.
Oh, because I did my.
Okay.
I forgot my. Thank you. So there's P's, my cube. This is why public is a problem too, right? Because there's so many functions, it's hard to find your own functions. All right. So that's a simple, rather stupid function that you would never need, but I'm going to run it by just saying select my cube, and I'm just going to give it an integer value. Anybody have a favorite integer you want cubed? 5? All right. So if I run that, it will return 125. Okay. Now the thing about functions, so there's a lot of built-in functions, right? And most of what you need are probably there. But every database has their own kinds of calculations. And sometimes it's nice to, if you're doing a retail one, you might want to create a function that would give you your total due, give you your tax amount, you might want to create the receipt so you don't have to write that every time or have the code just there. You can just call the function to do it. Yeah.
So is there a list of functions that's in the column? That's not all the functions possible.
Well, you can write your own functions. There may be more you can get. These are the ones that are default. Yeah, these are the default added by the template. There's a template that you can get when you say create database without any parameters, which is what we did. You just get a default template. That's a whole different thing. You can edit those templates. It's beyond the scope of this, as I say. All right, so that's a simple function. Questions on that? Just the only reason I did such a simple function is just to give you a sense of how the body of a function looks. They can get infinitely more complex. We're not going to go super complex. Okay, so everybody's okay with that? Yeah.
Why it's like trying to create
Did it give an error? It says that it worked.
Yeah, I did that. I found it like that.
So when you run that, so go to data. Yeah. Why is it not showing anything? There we go.
Steve, before you create a function, is there a way to search to see if one's already available?
Well, you could look through these.
I don't know what those do.
Yeah. There probably is documentation on these functions in the Postgres document. I've usually found them, it's kind of hard. You'd almost have to search for each function. I'm not sure that there's a thing for
What they do.
yeah, I mean, each function does, in the documentation, there is, if you search, if you search the documentation, all of these will have some kind of description in the documentation. I just don't know if there's a place where they're all together. I can tell what most of them do. A lot of these are for encryption and decryption, which is different than hashing. That's where you have a key, and then you can decrypt with if you have the proper key. So you got encrypt and decrypt. This is to get a key, I presume. Yeah, these are some randoms and some salt things. We use this. Digest, I'm not sure what digest is. You'd have to look at a lot of these to see. So there's 49 functions. I'm not sure how many others are just generally available. They're not in this template anyway. And there's, as I said, there are lots of extensions. There are libraries you can download, kind of like with other things. Like to do the encryption, you have to extend the library to add the crypto library.
You add a whole library of functions?
You probably can, yes. I will look into that to see if I can give you an example, but I'm pretty sure you can. There's lots of things you can add. All right, let's do another function. Let's make one that's a little more useful. We did this as part of the math exercise, so like back in chapter 2, but say you wanted a function where you wanted to get so a certain percent goes to the charitable, giveaway, and a certain percent goes to maintenance for the charity. So this is basically, I'm just going to create or replace a function, and I'm not sure, what did I name it here? I put this in employee schema. Did I make employee schema? So we got employee view. Yes, I did. Good. Because if I didn't, then I have to make that real quick. And I'm going to call it donation percentages or something. I will say that I am horrible at naming. So if you can think of better names. All right, so we're putting it in employee schema to just be easier to find there. And it makes sense as part of the employee schema. And I'm going to take in two values, an amount, which will be numeric or decimal, they're basically the same. And I'm going to take in a percentage, which will also be numeric. So this one takes in two values. If you've ever done Excel functions or other functions, where you have arguments, even Python, the principle is the same. Basically you have the name of the function, and then in parentheses you take in what parameters are you taking. What's that function take? And then we're basically just going to say what it returns, and it will return numeric.
Where does it leave it start?
It should start here. Thank you. Talking and typing is not my forte sometimes. And then I'm going to do as, and I'm going to use the $2 signs again. And I'm going to do a begin, because I'm going to use the end. I'm going to use the PLPG SQL. I don't know why I can't get those letters right. All right, so we're going to basically just return amount times percentage. And I'm going to modify this in a moment because there are some problems with this. And then I'm going to do the language. So the tool into the function there, and then language PLPG SQL. So let me put that where you can see the whole thing.
What is that? PLP.
So it's telling you that you're not using straight SQL. Later we will use straight SQL for some of them. So this is procedural language Postgres SQL. So right now there's nothing that we're doing that couldn't be just SQL. You could say language SQL, but you would then need to get rid of the beginning and end. PG SQL requires this blocking, but the regular SQL does not. But the reason I'm doing it is we're going to add a feature that is just PLPG SQL. We're going to add an if statement in a minute to this. If you want ifs, if you want any kind of thing like that, then it has to be the PLP SQL. Why? I'm not sure why Postgres distinguishes the two. So there's the main SQL vocabulary, which is sort of like SQL before a certain date. And then it has these are like additions to SQL. Most other things that I have, like SQL Server, MySQL, and things like that, don't distinguish. They just added the procedural features to SQL without making a distinction. And then Oracle, their whole language is called PSQL, which is procedural SQL. So let's see if this runs. Eesh. Oh, it didn't like end. Why does it not like? Oh, because I forgot the semicolon here. That's another thing that's a little bit different in SQL Server. You don't put any semicolons at the end of statements. Here you have to. So now it's good. This is one place where the semicolons are required. And I think you can put comments in here too if you wanted. Actually, it won't. Will this replace? It says create or replace. It should replace. Yeah, it's fine with comments, which is good because you might want to comment some things. All right, so I'm going to run this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do select donation. Let's do donation key, donation amount. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass, comma here actually. I'm going to say employee schema dot donation percentages. Let me break that line. I don't know if I can make this rise higher. There's a little higher. And then in donation percentages, I'm going to do the donation amount is the amount. And I'll do a comma for the percentage, and I'm going to say we want 70, some odd number, 76% to go to, so I'm going to alias this as to charity from donation. Okay, does that make sense? So we're going to show the donation key and the donation amount. And then for each donation amount, we're going to show that 76% goes to charity. And then I'll put a semicolon there that doesn't really matter.
So you ran the first one already. I'm sorry, I must have missed that.
I ran the function, yes.
Yes,
Whenever
I'm
you
on.
get- Do you have an employee schema? If you don't have an employee schema, you could just take an employee schema. Just put donation percentage. And it'll be. So just run that.
I think we're having the same issue.
Language P is PLPG.
I don't have the same issue this time because I tried one there. I haven't commented, but it does work.
Depends there at or near end. You need a semicolon.
Choose that one.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then
That would be mine.
Yeah, I just said.
Oh, wait, I gotta add it all.
Well, this is just exactly. You could just copy and paste it over to. All right. So out of $500, 380 goes. I'm trusting the math. I'm not going to do the out of 2,500, 1,900. Does that sound about right? So there's about a quarter that will go to maintenance. All right. Now there's a problem with this. What happens if somebody enters that as a percentage? So $38,000 is going to charity out of $500. Yeah. So one of the things you might want to do in a function like this is account for that possibility. Does that make sense? All right, so we can alter our function. I'm going to, because I want to have all of the versions of the script, you don't have to copy and paste, but I'm going to do that so we have multiple copies of, all the steps. So one of the reasons I did this as, and I left out the last line, one of the reasons that I did it with the PLP SQL is I knew I wanted to do an if in here. So one of the things I'm going to do in here is I'm going to say if, and I'm going to say percentage. And I'm going to say greater than 1 because you're never going to get more than 100%, right? You can't do more than 100% of a donation. So if it's greater than 1, so we will allow 100%, although why run the function if you're going to do that? We're going to say that if that is the case, then, and I'm going to say then percentage equals percentage divided by 100. Okay. And then I'm going to do end if. And I'm just making sure that I did the ifs then, yeah.
Got to return 5%. Got to return percentage.
Oh, this should actually be, I haven't finished, so this actually needs that too. This should work without return percentage up there. Did I do return up there? I did return amount times percentage. Let's see if this should work. If it doesn't, I'll do it the way the book has it. I mean, it should change the percentage so that this should be valid either way. What I did in the book is I returned percentage times, amount times percentage divided by 100. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't, I'll go the way the book does. I might change the book to be like this because actually this is more efficient. Yeah, so I have to bring it up to create or replace. It should allow that because we're not subtracting anything, we're just adding to it. So it's there. And now if I run this, it should be correct. Whoa. And it is correct. I'm not sure why all the decimal places. It is a lot of zeros. You could, I don't know if we would want to. What? You didn't?
Yeah.
Did you fix the... So all I did, whoa, I'm just trying to get the function in there and it keeps disappearing. So that's the whole function the way I have it now. And then I ran that.
So if the percentage is greater than 1, you said it can't happen.
Well, you could enter 76.
But from donation earlier. you were
Yeah,
saying-
well, I mean, logically, it doesn't make sense.
So, okay.
But this way, if a person enters the decimal, it should still work. And if they enter a grade, if they decide to enter the 75%, it should still work. Should work with either entry. Yeah.
Did I believe? And do you have to still?
You still have to
use
do the language.
The language part.
Yeah,
of
this
that,
all has to be there, including this.
Okay.
And this works. I might actually change the one in the book to match this one. Because it's actually, I actually don't like multiple return statements. Yeah. And let's just run if I run this one, it should still work too. Weird how this only returns 4 zeros and the other one returns like a dozen zeros. So both of these work. I could do, if you really wanted to, you could either round it when you call it, or I think I could do, I'm not sure if this will work or not, round. So I'm going to try to copy all of that again. Oh. Yeah, I think I'm sure that's the error. So it returns successfully. Let's see when I do the second one of these if it comes up with less. Yeah, that's a little bit better. I mean, if you wanted to format in the function. You might not want to format in the function. You might want to do that in the external query. So they both work. That rounding I did not do in the book either. But you can have functions inside of functions. I guess that's, and we will do a little of that when we do the inserts. Questions on that? Does that make sense? That gives you a little bit more complex function. And this one is slightly useful. All this stuff. Okay. Everything's okay. It's all clear. At least as clear as mud. And again, the reason you would do this is that in your database, you may have calculations you have to do over and over again. Yeah. And so you would write these functions so you don't have to write those calculations over and over again. You can just call the function. And they typically, most databases have some calculations that are unique to them. Right? So I'm going to do just a couple other functions that we will be using. I did the next one I did here, I guess, is a simple text one for creating a username. So, and I did this in the public one, I guess. So I'm going to do create or replace function, not gunction. And I'm going to call it make username. And it's going to take two values. First name as text and last name as text. All right. So we're going to use this one later when we do add new person. So I want to do this now. It's going to return text. So returns text. And then we do the as. Now, I did this again as P. I think this one could actually work just fine as just regular SQL, but we'll do it as I did it. Because I don't think there's any if in here.
Can you repeat the difference between PLP, GSQL, just regular SQL?
So this one has all of the ifs and whens and theirs, and so the procedural language. There are certain things like the one we did up here could not be done in straight SQL. The one with the if statement about the percentage. This one could be done straight SQL because we're just doing regular SQL stuff in it.
So how do you know which version?
So I tend to write them this way for the most part. Yeah, there's a couple of them we won't though. The insert ones we won't. We could. I mean, either one works. This one always works. SQL only sometimes works. Does that make sense? PLPG SQL will always work. The straight SQL will only work if what you're doing is straight SQL.
You can do this on straight.
You can use this on straight SQL. Yeah. This will work whether it's SQL or it has procedural elements. The SQL one will only work if it's just straight SQL.
And then the create or replace function.
Yeah.
How you start.
Yeah, you could just say create function if you want. But create or replace means that if the function does exist and you've been adding to it, you can just run it again. If you just create it, then you need to like alter it or drop it to make changes. Yeah.
If there was an existing function and you just wanted to replace it, could you just say replace function, or is it something created?
You know, I don't know actually if you can just say replace function. Let's try. I think it will fail, but maybe not. So this function, we're just replacing it with what is there. Is it going to run? It doesn't like replaces the first command.
Jeff asked you, you do say you can, instead of using the dollar signs, you can use the quotes, single quotes around the body.
Yes, you
Where
can.
does the body begin and end?
After as.
Where the dollar signs are?
Yes.
So you just replace those with.
Right. You could price them with quotes if you want. You could single quotes. You could quote all of this, although I don't think you can quote it if it's PEL. You might be able to. I mean, if it's just SQL, you can quote it. I'm not sure in this one. The body begins after the as. All of this. So the name here, donation percentages, is considered as an alias for this. Does that make sense? We use as aliases. That function name is an alias for all this content. That's sort of the logic of the as. We used as with views also, and you know, it always uses it here. So this one isn't too hard. I just want to take the first letter of the first name and then get the concatenate it with the last name. And I can do this in one line. Remember doing this? This is, so I'm going to do return. I'm going to put it all in lower. Remember that function puts everything in lowercase. I'm going to do a substring. And because I'm only inserting, I'm only taking the first thing, I can just do first name, which is coming in as a string. And I'm going to take the first character, and I'm only going to go one character. I'm going to start at 1 and go to 1. So that's substring. And then I'm going to, actually within the lower still, I'm going to concatenate the last name. Okay. So what that will result in is it will result in taking the first letter, the first name, and then concatenating it with the whole last name, and it'll put all into a lower case. So that's how we're creating our usernames. Just keeps you from having to type this stuff in. And that's actually the whole function, except for the language statement at the end. So $, and then language. So if we wanted to, if we got rid of the begin and the end, I could make the language as SQL. You want me to do that just to see if it works? Well, all right. PGL SQL. So I said PGL SQL always works. All right. What? It's P, yeah, whatever it is, it's up here. Let me copy that. And this is a problem I have. The one problem I have with this is it just has too many letters. And I'm a touch dyslexic. If I'm trying to loosen a bolt, I always tighten it first. All right. So that should work as a function. Okay. And then we can test this function. So I'm going to select make username. I'm just going to do this as, well, we could do it. Let's do it from a, so let's do person first name, person last name, and then we'll do make username, and we will do person first name, first and last name. And I'm going to break that so it's on screen, and then from person. We could alias this as username. Okay. And when I run that, it should return their, J. Anderson, T. Zimmerman, and so it takes the first letter of their first name and their whole last name and puts it all in lowercase and combines it. Which, if you look in the login table, is how their names go, because I used a function like this to populate it. Yeah.
Steve, in the practice of doing SQL, I presume you create many functions as well as many kind of sub-programs. Do you just put those in a personal library and then copy and paste?
Oh, it depends. A lot of them are pretty unique to the database. I probably should. I tend to just recreate things over and over again, which is not necessarily your best plan. So if there is something, like if you were going to do this for lots of different databases, one thing is you could put it somewhere where you could always just copy and paste it into there. Or I do believe there are ways to create add functions that will to the template so that they will always be there. Yeah. That's weird. Why is it? Can you tell this I will post this stuff so you can copy and paste it from the blog. It's also all in GitHub, right? Although there are a couple of minor errors in it. Yeah.
Steve, just clarify in terms of using this, is your decision if you want to make it as a query or if you want to just save the function.
Right.
Pre-program it.
The purpose of saving it as a function is that it will always be there when you need it within the database, right? You could always run this as a query. You can just do this, right? You don't have to save it as a function, but as a function, then you can just call it. You don't have to worry about it again. Now, there are some things, like we're going to do in a moment, where you would really want them to be functions, because one of the things you can do with these functions is you can make a layer through which the users interact with your database. So rather than let them query the tables directly, you can have them work through functions and procedures, which is safer as a database administrator, because you control how they access things. And a lot of times if you're giving it to a developer, you don't give them the table list, you give them the functions and procedures that they can interact with and the views. You don't tell them you don't give them the table list. All right. I'm going to do another one. I know there's a lot here, but we're just looking at different kinds of functions. Questions on these? Could you think of some on your own? I mean, if you were to do this, it's basically just something that you have to do over and over again. You just want to encapsulate it so you don't have to do it over and over again. Part of it would make more sense if you were actually using the database, right? We're querying it based on my queries, but if it was a database you were actually working with, you would know what things need to be functions. Yeah.
So when you say like you store these functions, you have to keep redoing it or whatever, like, as the people get added or whatever, to make the username, like, would you just like periodically go and refresh it? Like, I'm just curious.
What do you mean?
I'm just curious in like what capacity you would use it as a function, like.
So we're going to use this one in a stored procedure. So we're going to create, and a stored procedure is just a function also. It's a function that returns void. We're going to create a procedure that adds a new person. As part of that procedure, we will call this to create their username. Right? So they'll enter their first name, their last name, they'll enter some stuff. We will take that and use this function to create their username. We will also use the password function to create their password.
So does it automatically happen as people are being added?
Well, so you would have to call it when you're from the program to make it. But that's how I would do it. When I take the input in a form, from the web page, I would then pass it to the function, which would then write it to the database. Okay, so let's do one more kind of a simple one. Question? One? Okay. This is a little bit different. One of the things you might want to do is to let people see like their donations or see their own, basically their own info. So you don't want them to be able, you pretty much have to give them permission on the whole table, but you don't want them to see the whole table, right? So basically what you want to do is have them call this through a function. So I'm going to create or replace a function, and I'm going to let the donor basically be able to see, and I think I have a donor schema. I made that, right? And I'm going to say get donations, and it's going to be get donations for a particular person. I'm going to take just the donor key, and it will be an integer. Now, if this again was a before as, I need to do what it returns, and it's going to return a table, right? Most of everything we've done so far returns a single value. This is going to return a table of values, and I need to define the table. So it's going to return the date, the amount. So I'm going to do so I put date in quotes because it's a data type and I don't want it to get confused. So timestamp, I'm going to do the amount, which is numeric. And I'm going to return the validation, which is a UUID. So that's my table that we're going to return. It's not going to create a real table. It's just a result table. Just exists in the result as a result. Does that make sense? So we have to define what we're returning. We're going to return the date of the donation, we're going to return the amount, and we're going to return the validation. So that they could, theoretically the validation is so they have something they can check on their donation about.
Why do you have a donor key integer on the second?
Because that is the input we're going to take. So basically you have to enter your donor key. Now, the way this would work, again, if you were doing it from the web, is typically when they've logged in, you've returned their key, which would be their person key probably, to, you've stored it in a web, a session variable or a cookie. And so they won't need to know their key right? They'll just it'll just be passed in by the program, and then it will do it. But so once they've logged in, when they want to see their donations, it'll just pull up their donations. They don't ever have to see their key. The program will manage that.
Program knows that because they signed in.
Because they've signed in, because they've logged in, right? That's a whole part we're not doing, but that's how it would typically work. Here, they would need to know their key because you'd have to be able to pass it in. So I'm going to do the same as with the dollar signs. And then I'm going to do a begin and end. Although, again, it's not, it could probably be SQL. So what I'm going to do is return query. And then the query is what follows. So select, basically we want donation date, donation amount, and donation validation from donation, where the donation, where person key equals donation key or donor key. What did I say? Donor key. Yeah. Which is what we were passing in up above. And then I'm going to do language, dollar sign, dollar sign. LPGSQL. All right. It's marking the beginning and end of the function block. Let's see. And you don't have to use a dollar sign, you can use other symbols, but the dollar sign is the typical one. It just needs to be some non-used character that you're blocking the beginning and the end with. So we're just doing a function, we're just doing a query. That's why I said if we didn't do the begin and end, we could just make it an SQL one. But we're just, we're returning donation date, donation amount, donation validation. They will be mapped to these, our little table, right? Donation date to date, donation amount to amount, donation validation to validation. And the donation, we're only going to return the ones for a particular donor. So let's see, I haven't saved this yet.
Steve,
Yeah.
If you're changing all the names, why do you have date only one in quotes?
Because date is a reserved word.
And the timestamp is not going to be the current timestamp, but it's going to refer.
That's a data type. And that's the type that is in donation. So the reason why, oh, I don't have a donor schema. Do I have a, I just did I can do that real quickly. Create schema. Donation or donor schema.
So we have to as well.
If you want to run it in donor schema, if you don't have that, yeah. The other thing to do would be just to take the donor schema out of the name.
So first create the donor schema, then run the other stuff.
What is employee schema too?
You could put it in employee schema. You could put it wherever you
By
want.
default.
Yeah. So it worked now. So again, date is a data type. And in a table, it has the context of a data type. So that's why it's double quoted. I could name it something else, like donation date or something. The names up here don't have to have different date names.
Are these tables that you're creating, it's being added to the table?
No,
On the,
it's actually just going to be a result set. I mean, it's not saved to the database. It doesn't have any existence after the queries run. Does that make sense?
what's the point of it not saving?
Because we're returning something different. All of our functions in the before return just a single value. This is going to return a table of values. So if I run this, it's also run in a different way. Interesting, I put that up there.
If you were to use this in actual apps,
You would call the,
save the data and save it.
well, you would just pass it. The only thing you need to do, you could call this and do this. What it would return is a table. So you would have to take the return if you were writing an app, and you'd probably have to loop through the table. You'd have to say create table, TD, the cells, and just write these values inside the loop.
So you use existing.
No, this returns these three values as a table. Let me show you. I'm going to select star from, and then I'm going to do donor schema dot donation function, donation,
Get donations.
yeah, whatever, get donations. Okay. Would help if I had more than a 2-second memory. And I'm going to do 79 because I've done that before. Now 79 is the person key. And the reason I'm doing 79 is just I looked ahead of time and I know that it's a donor that has more than one donation. Yeah.
So after like the function or whatever that we just wrote, did you have to run select person first name, person last name?
No, that's actually from
The previous.
Previous,
Okay,
yeah.
so I'm just getting confused. I just want to make sure.
Is 79 a person key? Or
It's
the
a person
donor
key. So donor key is just a variable inside the function. It's actually the person key.
It's a person key.
It'll be mapped to the donor key. So if you look at this, it says where person key equals donor key,
Oh, okay.
and the donor key is what gets passed in. So the donor key is a person key. I just named them differently inside.
Okay.
I didn't want it where you say person key equals person key. You could do that if you named this person key.
Mhm.
So if I run this anyway, oh, I only got one person. So it gives you the date and the donation, and then their key. I'm just going to randomly put another number in here. I thought 79 had more than one. None. 4. I'm just randomly putting numbers in here. Oh, I didn't copy the select. Oh, one of the things we could do is select star from donation and just see who donated. So we got a person key. I want a person key that appears more than once. I don't know if any of them do. 6. Let's try 6. 20 does too. Six is donated a lot. Okay. So the person has logged in, right? So they would know. They don't need to necessarily see their name or anything here, but this would be the dates of their donations, the amounts of their donations, always $500, and the particular This is just a random universal, what do they call it? UUID, universal unique ID.
500 is not in the same format, so.
Because I didn't enter them in the same format.
But doesn't, if you set it,
You could format it.
okay.
Yeah.
It's not formatted,
Yeah.
it's just-
I entered this with decimal points. I didn't enter this with decimal points. But it returns a whole table of values. But this table doesn't exist anywhere except right here, right in the results.
So when I tried that 6, I didn't quite get that. But I did run this.
We still have 79.
No, I know, but, oh, wait. Sorry, I didn't select it all. If I were to select it and run it, that would fine. And then I did this. I just got one.
I'm wondering if it's. Well, so you did select that and you're running just that.
Yes. So 6, you said had money.
We added all those.
Did we?
Yeah, look at this from early.
Oh, so I might have added these in the quarter.
I think we did it as part of.
So you may not have this many.
Okay,
Cause I only have like 3.
okay.
I'm like, we just repeated it.
Why did we add that many donations?
I think it's probably selected the whole page and ran it rather than just insert statement.
20, you said also has a couple?
I have 2. Thank you. I was like,
Yeah. So 6 we must have just really just.
Okay, we're done. Okay, thank you. I was just thinking the same result before, so I was like,
Okay. Does that make sense as a return table? The other thing, notice this is this is kind of like the subquery at the end. When you do a table valued function, as a function that returns a table, it occurs in the from clause. All the others are going to be in the select, but this one occurs in the from clause. Yeah.
Just one question. So this one timestamps data only some at a time. So if you're entering them in a format, that format would be consistent.
So it depends. So when I enter, one of the nice things if you were entering through a form is you could probably formulate it better. Some of mine have times because I have a default timestamp, but these I entered manually and I didn't enter time. I just entered days. If you don't enter a time when it's a timestamp, you default to midnight. But these others were entered at a particular time, which was during class, right? So that one was entered 11:41, 11:44, 11:51, and they were all on the same day. So yes, I did somehow enter it many times that same day. Why did I enter it so many times? That is weird. I don't remember. All right, so does this all sort of make sense? I'm going to move this back where it belongs. Okay, I'm just putting it there so that it's in the right place. Okay, so now we're actually going to do a function where we're going to, this would be called a store procedure in most languages. Postgres SQL does not have the create procedure keyword until version 11. So if you have the server 11, you can actually say create procedure. But this up until then, it's just functions. Also, that we're on Linux, and version 11 doesn't work on Linux yet. So we're going to use 10. So we're going to basically just create it as a function. There's another thing that version 11 does that I haven't played with, which would be really useful in a procedure, is it lets you error trap better. And error trapping can be really useful. Just to make it so that it all happens or none of it happens, and if it doesn't happen, it throws an error. Okay? But we'll just do it this way for now. I'm going to create or replace function. And the function is going to be add person, because we're going to add a person. Wait, let's make it 2. It's going to have a lot of parameters, because we need basically everything. So first name, and that will be text. We'll do last name, text. We'll do email. We'll do phone. There's probably a way to set defaults on this, and I might look at that in just a moment. I'm going to add announce is a Boolean. Does that exist yet? We were going to put it so that they could get announcements. I don't know if I actually did that in here. Did I do that? Let me look at person real quickly. Because if we are doing an announcement in the person date added, person email. So I don't have an announcement yet on that. It's interesting. Oh, well, we'll leave it. We'll fix it in a moment. Boolean is true or false, right? Apartment text. Street text. Again, most of these would come in through a form, probably. City text. I'm going to put this in quotes. State text. State will come out red if you don't, because it's a keyword. Zip code text. Oh, I did zipped. This one actually I made as car 2.
If this was coming out from a form and your state was from a drop-down, would it still be text?
Yes, because the value would be text, right? So, I mean, it would be a character. I'm making a character 2, actually. You would still be passing it as text. It would just be that you're choosing the text from the drop-down. It is possible. Our database isn't set up that way, but it is possible that you could have a lookup table of states, and then it might be an int, because you would just do the value that goes to it. I did this one as car 11. And password. I'm just going to do this as password like this. And I did var car 50. Oops, not 5, 50. Do I have more? No, that's all of the values. So, and then I have returns. And what we're going to return is void, which means it's not going to return anything. And then I'm going to do as, and I'm going to do the dollar signs again. Now this one I'm going to do as just SQL, but we could modify it to be PLPG SQL. And I might also see if we can make some of these defaults. Default to null, allow nulls or that. I know how to do it in SQL Server. I'm not sure if I know how to do it here, but I will try. Yeah.
Can you explain why it says returns void? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
It doesn't return any value. We're going to insert stuff, right? It doesn't return any value. Now, if you were doing this for a program, you might want it to return like an integer, like 1 if it succeeds, 0 if it fails. You know, that's a possibility too. I think I played with that and had some issues though, so that's why we're returning void. I am going to, in the body here, and then I'm not saying begin or end. If I wanted to do it as PG, PLSG, PL, whatever it is, I would need to put a begin end, right? And you could do that, but we're doing pure SQL, so I did it as SQL. I'm going to say insert into person, and then I need all of those fields again. So I'm going to do person first name, person last name. Person, I'm going to do them in kind of a couple rows here. Person last name, person email, person primary phone, person date added. And I'm also going to add, I forget, I'm going to put person, what was it, announce? That field doesn't exist. We're going to create it in just a few moments.
We didn't have anything about the dates.
I'm going to just do that as a default. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do values. So we'll do first name. Can't type. Last name. Email. And then for the phone, we had phone up there, right? Yeah, phone. And then I'm going to, for the date, I'm just going to say current timestamp. And then for announcements, I'm going to do announce. Although, well, I'm not sure if we need to pass that in, but we could. Okay, so that's the first. Let me break that line just for. So we're inserting these. First name, last name, email, phone, timestamp, and announce.
Do you have extra parentheses?
Do I have what?
Extra parentheses after insert?
I don't think so. Begin, end. Oh, I do. Good idea. Good eye. All right. So I'm going to make a space, and then I'm going to insert into person address. Actually, maybe we should do insert into, well, we could do person address. Doesn't matter what order you do these, right? Person address. And I need to look at the fields for that. So person key. Person address street. Person address city. Person address state. Person address zip code. And the apartment was added late. I should have probably just left it off, which is why it's last in there. Person address apartment. You don't have to do them in the same order, actually, if you don't want to. Values, so we've got person key. I am going to do the cur val. Person underscored person key underscore sequence. All right, so we're getting the person that was just inserted. Apartment, actually not apartment, that goes last. So it'd be street, city, state. I don't know if I should quote that. Yeah, okay, so zip code. And apartment. Okay, I'm gonna break that just so it kind of fits better. Does that make sense? And a semicolon, there's a semicolon after each of these inserts. And then I'm going to do one more insert. Insert into basically one insert into login table. And the login table has person key, person username, and person password. Okay, so then I'm going to do values, and this is going to be like all functions, right? I mean, so I'm going to say curval, and then in quotes, person underscore person key underscore sequence. Okay, so we get the person key. The username, we're going to use the function that we used before, which is, did I call it make username? Which should just, then we would do first name, comma, last name, because we've got those as variables, we can use them again. So I hope that that's the right name of the function. I'll look in a second. And then create password. And we want, basically, we just need to enter last name and then concatenate it with the word pass. That's, I wouldn't do that. We actually entered their password, right? So we don't have to do that. We could just say password. Password. Because we entered it above. We could do the function, but we're going to let them enter their own password. So I think that's all the inserts we need to do. And then I'm going to close this and say language. And this one is just SQL. If you want, we can redo it as PSQL. Right?
Just default SQL.
Yeah, this is just default SQL.
So you have to write the language. SQL.
I think it still requires you to write it. I'm pretty sure it'll give an error if there's no language statement. Now, if we wanted it to be P, etc., SQL, we would have to just do a begin and end. That's really the only difference that it would take, right? We want it to be consistent that way. We don't have a begin-end statement here. Let's see if it will go. I mean, it's way up there. Oh, what does it not like? Oh, person announcements doesn't exist. Right, so we need to alter table person. I thought I had done this. So we want to add person announcements. Did I call it? What did I call it down here? Person announcements. Boolean default true.
So you want us to run this right now?
Yeah, if you don't, the other thing won't run.
Okay.
What I was doing, I was going to said that there would be announcements of events. So when we added all the tables and stuff, I know why it isn't there. I did the tables on my laptop at home to during the snow,
Mhm.
so I never did them here. That's why I don't have this announcement. So the idea was that they would get it. They would be told whether announcing different events, and then they could opt out. They're opted in. This is a bad. It's a typical company employee. You're opted into the email, and you have to actually ask to be out. But
I have a question. So I understand like all the parts where you're inserting into because that's like the table, like how it's listed, and then the values is deriving from above. Is that correct? Like you scroll up when you listed the whole thing, last name, first name.
yeah, these are all the values that are coming in. These are parameters.
So these are the people like that are entering.
They would enter all this probably into a form, like when you're registering.
Right, and that's being mapped to like.
And it's
last
being
name,
mapped to
first
the
name, last name.
inserts.
Okay.
And I spelled person username wrong. Let me look. Yeah, person username. I just spelled it wrong. All right. All right, so it works, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to enter a new person. And this is a little bit weird. So you select add person. And then we need to enter all those values. So I've got a name here, but we're going to have to add all of those parameters. And again, typically in real life, what would happen is that these would be in a form. You would be entering them into the text boxes, and then they would be passed as variables to a statement like this. Yeah.
Steve, in terms of adding to the keys, so if it's a primary key, you don't need to do the command because that naturally adds.
In my database, all of the primary keys are sequences, which means that they automatically number.
Just the foreign keys that you need to.
Foreign keys you have to add. And what this does is it's looking for the last number produced in the person table sequence. Yeah. So I don't know where this name came from, but I'm going to copy it. Joseph. So first name, Rogers. And then the email. I'm having trouble typing as usual. Okay, and I'm going to break this just to keep it on screen. I don't know why it's. So what do we need now? We need the phone number, 206-555-2345. I don't think those. We never applied a unique one, did we? So this one would be true. Is this true? Yes, okay. I was just looking at the order of things. And then we need, I'm going to give him an apartment. I think I could enter null. I mean the word null if I didn't want an apartment. I'm copying this because my mind is new. Seattle. Washington. So and I'm just gonna 98 whatever. And their password is going to be what I was going to have it be, just Rogers Pass. Okay, so that should enter everything. Okay, so it returned null, which is okay. So if I do select star from person, actually, and let's just do where person key equals select max person key from person. I just want to just pull up the one person I did. So what is it not like? Oh, I didn't close the paren. Okay, so there's Rogers Joseph with all of that information inserted. And this is person 137. So if I do select star from person address, where person key equals 137, we should get the address that we entered for this person. There it is. And we should also, if we do select star from login table, where person key equals 137, we should get their login. So the point of this is you could, oh, but the password didn't get encrypted. Why did the password not get encrypted? Oh, I do need to do create pass. All right, so let's do that. I knew that there was something wrong there. What we need to do is create password parens. So I should be able to run this again. I added I'll show you.
So you're calling the password function.
I am, and I should have called it last time. I was thinking that we have a password, but we don't have encrypted it. So this encrypts it. Create password. I added this at the very end.
So you only ran it up until the point of like where it ends there.
I ran it all the way up to.
From that part.
You have to always run the whole thing to redo it.
So what's the specific call for that password? You just
Create password. What do you mean?
That's the name of the function.
This is the name of the function.
Where's the call command at the top where you do create? Don't you have to call for this?
No, this select calls it right here.
Select calls.
Or the insert calls it, actually.
It's being called.
Yeah, just naming it and passing it the parameters is enough. So if I change this to, I'm just going to do, that was S. Rogers. Let's do J. Rogers. The email has to be unique. As for the rest, it doesn't care. If I run it now, and I do this should be person 38. See, we've entered them again. As long as the email is unique, it doesn't care. So if I do this as 138, the address will be the same as the person.
That's the only thing you said is unique.
Yeah, the only thing that I said had to be unique was the email. So they're there again, and now this one should have the actual encrypted password.
When you ran it all again, once you changed the
Yeah.
password, I did that, and then after that, what do you run it separately?
I ran this again, but I changed
So it's at the email.
you have to change the email slightly somewhere.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you just run that again. And then it's the person after the one we just created. So it was 137, now it's 138. Your number might differ, right? Because you've added some people and stuff.
So see, if you don't want duplicate entries, do you get it back it up? And suppose they change their email address, back it up with another launcher.
You could. It's hard though. So what's going to be unique? You could maybe put a unique on the phone. I didn't because my phone numbers aren't unique. But typically in real life they should be unique. So you could do a unique on that, a unique on that. But you wouldn't want to do a unique on address necessarily. You could maybe. I don't know. It's actually one of the disadvantages of auto numbering. Your primary key is it's perfectly happy to repeat the same record over and over and over again.
Ask you a question. I don't know if I misplaced this, but it's not right. It isn't running. I think I may have done something insert into like a
So the insert, you just do Rogers Pass. The PAS, you wouldn't do that here. This is outside the.
No, I know, but something here happens. Is there a way you can scroll up? I don't know why it wouldn't.
I'm not sure.
Just right there, yeah. Okay.
This is inside the function.
You create a function you have
So one of the things that I have you do in the other, one of the things I have you do in your assignment is basically insert a new student, right? So it's the same basic. I think I'm going to not show you variations of this, just because I don't want to confuse you more. But
Thank you.
You want to change it,
the logic of this, right, is not super hard. At the beginning, you create it, you list all of the things that you are going to need for the inserts. Right, and some things you don't have to enter, like the date, you can just do current timestamp. Some things you can maybe do by function, like the username you can generate. But everything that you're going to need, you need in here. And then you just do the inserts. The advantage of doing it this way is that you make sure that you do insert into all the tables, right? And that you don't end up with a person who never has, who has no address and is not doesn't have a login, right? So you make sure that all those things happen. And you control how they happen, right? So it's a good idea. You still having trouble?
That's like add person. I changed the email, but I didn't want to.
Let me look real quickly, but I want to get a couple more things to go over with this taking a while.
You know, we have to use these
Yeah, that should
certificates
be
because there's person keys in them.
Function address. No, no, no,
There's
no,
also
no,
personal
no,
key information too.
no function matches the given name.
It's like things with the chain itself, it's kind of like some identity. There's Seattle. And there's Washington. Yeah, that looks cool. It was tripping out a little bit earlier. And Rogers, so there's a code.
So I may just skip the next one to get to the trigger, which is a harder one.
One question I have,
Yeah.
on updates, you need to put all columns in the update
Yes,
function, but then you don't have to input all the columns.
you do have to input all the columns.
But what if you're not, you end up changing? the
Right,
value
so the way the update works is it just rewrites the thing, and if the values are the same, it just writes the same value back.
for it? You have to input
But you have-
the value.
So typically what happens with an update, so the next thing is to create one thing where you allow somebody to update their values. I should just go get it and paste it for time. But so it basically has, it's kind of like this person one, you enter all the values that are involved in the update, right? So I had actually all the same values pretty much. I guess I could do it. But it may be triggers next time if we don't. All right, so I'm going to actually copy down through this. I'm going to paste this. I'm going to change the name of this function to update person. And then what I'm going to do after the as is I'm just going to update. Now there's one addition. There's one addition that we need to do, which is we need their person key. I think I called it PK, and it's an integer. Right. So, and again, this person key could come in from a form. And typically what happens with an update is it posts all the existing information to the form. Right. So it's all there. And then you just change the values you want to change. Right. So, and then it writes all of them back. If they haven't changed, it writes the old values back. If it has changed, it writes the new ones. What you don't want to do, which would be a total programming nightmare, is try to figure out which columns have changed and only write those back. So I'm just going to update person. And so I'm going to set person last name. It doesn't matter which to last name. First name, or person first name equals first name. Person, what do we got? A person email. That needs a comma too. Person primary phone equals phone. What else do I have in person? Person, I'm not going to change person data added. So I think that's all. We also had the Yeah, person announcements. Is that what I named it?
There was amounts.
I just announced. All right, and then this is important. This is why you would run it through here, where person key equals PK, P key. If you don't do that, right, then you could change everything. All right, so I'm going to do again update. God, excuse my language. All right, update person address. And then we're going to set, what do we got? We don't need the person key. So person address, we need, yeah, so we need person address street. What did I do up there? Just street? Yeah. I suppose they could change city. If you do shift enter, it goes back to the column. So we got person address city. It's when I'm typing these that I really hate how I name things. Person address state equals state zip code. I keep forgetting to do the shift though. Person address zip code equals zip code. And again, you want, very importantly, where person key equals person key, or equals PK. Did I do? Yeah, I need to do the language. I didn't do any updates for like the password or something. I'd probably handle that through a different thing, a different store procedure where you change your password, you know, so that it comes up the way your old password, your new password. I would probably do that in a different update. So I need to end this. So I want to do that, and then language. Again, this can be just SQL. If you wanted, you could make it. You could put the begin and the end in there, and you could make it PL SQL. So basically, I'm just updating all the fields. And again, typically what this would do is it would present in a form where you would have all of these already filled out in the text box, right? If you think about going on the web and you say you want to update your values, they show you all the existing values. You change the ones that you want to change, but it writes everything back. So if the old value is in the text box, that's what gets written back. If it's a new value, then it writes the new value. As I said, it would be really, really hard to go through and figure out which fields have been changed and then to construct on the fly an update statement for those particular fields. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So Steve, the database can store hundreds of details about something, right?
Yes.
So updating clearly is laborious in terms of updating the whole person information set. You can use update for individual data points, right? So we should just create a series of functions that will allow them to update the email, update the phone.
I think that would be I mean, as
rather than
I,
having them input everything, because they might not remember.
they don't have to input everything.
But you said everything
Every value has to be here.
has to be in the update, but you don't need to input it into the.
No, what I'm saying is that typically in a web form, when they bring up the update thing, they've done a select and they've pre-populated all the text boxes with all the data that was already in the database. You only change the ones that need to change.
What about all the data on like tracking their purchases?
That would be a different thing, and you don't let them update that anyway, you just return that. Yeah.
How's the deal with those?
No, this is just like, maybe they changed their email. Maybe they got married and their name changed.
I thought you said all the values in the CSV
They do,
query, but aren't those also values?
but they're different values. I mean, I would deal with update. These are like their personal information. So this is just for updating their personal
So if you
information.
touch a table of the personal nature, what you do, put all the table in the columns.
When you do an update in a stored procedure like this, or when you do an update through a web page, generally you list all the values in the tables that you're updating. And as I said, you can pre-populate the form with all those values so that they only have to write the ones that are changed.
You said generally, you don't have to put a column in there if you don't want to.
If you don't, it won't. So I didn't put the date in there, right? The date added, it's going to stay the same.
Okay, so it's up to you what you want to put.
Yeah, you don't have, if you don't update it, I mean, they can't change it. If you don't put it in here, it can't be changed. And I wouldn't do a separate update for every field. Yeah.
Just scroll up to the end of that. Just a quick question. All them are. Thank you.
Let me run this. Now, in this environment, oh, it didn't like person, address, apartment. Comma. All right. Okay, in this environment, we do have to add all of those data points. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Roger. I'm going to bring it down here.
So you have to input every one that you.
Yeah. In this environment, you have to add all of them. It doesn't allow you to null them.
All the ones that are in.
All the ones that are in the update.
Or just the ones that are updated.
Yeah. So that's pretty much all of these, right? What do we want to change about Rogers? Let's change this to false. Let's say they've moved. Same address, but in Bellevue. How's that? All right. So now the password isn't a part of this, so that goes away. I think they do have to be in the right order. Actually, it should be okay because in this, I did the same order as the other one. I copied it. We can see. It'll fail if it's wrong. Joseph Rogers. No function matches the given name and argument types. What did I call it? Update person. So let me see. Oh, you know what I didn't give, which matters? Their primary key, which is what, 138, the last one? What? 138. we're not adding it, we're changing an existing record. All right, what does it not like? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this.
No function matches the given name.
Well, it doesn't, it's the arguments. So this is an integer. I wish I could. So PK, first name, last name, email. First name, last name, email. Phone, right? Phone announces true. I took the password out. What? Oh, this needs to go out of here. Yes. Good eye. I took the password out because we're not changing the password. Let's see if it works now. Yeah, so when it returns void, it worked. So if we do a quick select, we change the address, right? Well, let's do we changed whether they want to receive it to false, right? So that's false. And then we changed the address. Looking for my things here. To Bellevue. So there's Bellevue. And we changed, we didn't do anything to the login table. So our updates worked. We changed the existing values. And again, update is really dangerous, which is why you'd probably want to run it through something like this to make sure that there's a where clause and that it limits it to their own data. If they accidentally forgot that if you gave them that, if they accidentally didn't enter a person key, you could destroy your table.
See, creating is actually shorter because you don't have to redefine all your columns.
What do you mean?
Well, you're redefining person, city, city, that kind of stuff. Whereas in create, you don't have to do that.
I'm not sure what you mean. If you don't do create or replace, if you just do create, there would be no difference in this.
You can create that update short.
Well, you still want to update. Update is changing existing values. Update is an essential function, but it's a really dangerous one. I don't think I have time to do triggers. The last thing. We've got, what, 15 minutes? I could do it, but it'd be awful fast. You want to do it, or you want to wait until Thursday?
Thursday, open lab.
It will be, we'll do triggers and then open lab. Triggers won't take very long. They may take more than 15 minutes, but they won't take more than 20 or 30, I don't think. Maybe not even that long, depends on the questions. I mean, I could try to do a trigger right now, but it's be tight. You wanted me to try? No? Why? Some do, some don't. What's the consensus? Yes, no?
We'll start, if we don't finish, we'll just, redo it next time.
We could start, I guess. It'll be fast. I will post this to all of the stuff we've done too. This is a lot, and I think it'll take you a little while to process. I will try a trigger. So I'm going to do a couple of little things. First, I'm going to alter the table grant application. I'm going to put a little flag in there. I will try. I'm going to move a little fast because of time. I'm going to add is flagged Boolean default false. Okay. So we're adding a flag. Basically, we're adding a field to grant application. The default is false. What we're going to do is we're going to create a trigger that when you insert a new grant, will flag it if they're asking for more than the minimum or the maximum value. Does that make sense? So there's two parts to a trigger. The first part is you define the trigger function. So I am going to create a replace function. And this would be for grant flag request is what I'm going to call it. All right, one of the things about a trigger function is it can't take any arguments. So we do empty parentheses there. Because triggers are triggered by an event in the database, like an insert or an update or that. So I'm going to do returns trigger. So trigger is something that can return as, and then I'm going to, this one I did body, but you could just do the double things too. I'm going to do begin and I'll do an end just so I don't forget it. I wish I would stop doing that. And then in between, I'm going to do if new. And new is a keyword, grant application amount. So new is when you've inserted it. It actually stores it in memory temporarily before it writes it. And at that stage, it's new. So we're going to do if new grant application amount is greater than, and I'm going to do a subquery, select grant application, grant type one time max. Grant type one time max. So I told you I hate my naming. All right, from grant type. Where grant type key equals new grant type key. So whatever the grant type key is in the new request. So we're saying if it's greater, if what they're asking for is greater than the maximum for that type, so that's the beginning of the if, then we want to update. So I'm just going to do this. Update grant application, because we're assuming the insert has happened. And we're going to set is flagged, which is the field we just made, equal true. Where grant application key equals new grant application key. All right, so again, the new is it's the one that's in memory right now. It's the one in process. So I will do a semicolon here. Do I need a semicolon up there? No. And then I will do an end if with a semicolon. And we're going to return new. Okay. We're going to do, we've got the end, and we're going to kill, instead of the double things, I did the body this time. So I need to close the body. Lucky it's not case sensitive, because and then I need to say that the language, and I think, oh no, that's fine the way it is. Language, this time it is PLPGSQL. Okay, so this is the trigger function. It's not the trigger itself, but it's a function that works as a trigger. I'm going to run it to see if it works. Okay, so that is happy with the trigger function. Now I'm going to make the trigger. As I said, this is fast. We'll go over it again if you need next time. So I'm going to create the trigger. So create trigger. Flag. We're going to flag over amounts. So that's just the name of the trigger. It's going to happen after an insert. You can do it. It can happen after an insert. It can happen before an insert. It can also happen instead of an insert if you want to block the insert, right? Instead of means that you do this instead of inserting. We're going to allow the insert to happen, and then we're going to update it if it needs to be updated with that flag. And then we're going to say on what table it's on. So on grant application, a trigger is always on a table. And then I'm going to do for each row. And we need to say what procedure we're going to use. So we're going to say execute procedure. And that's where our trigger function comes in, flag request. Right, so we are going to be executing the one we just created when we do the trigger. So that worked. Let's try the trigger, and then we'll call it a day if it works, even if it doesn't work. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to insert into grant application. And I need, so for grant application, I basically need the timestamp. So I need the current timestamp. I'm just looking. I suppose I should do, I think I have to do this actually. I have to list the things. So grant application date. I was trying to hurry and that messes me up. So grant application. Grant application date, person key. Grant type key, grant application amount, and grant application explain. We don't have to do the confirm because that's auto-generated. So let's do values. And the date is current timestamp. As I said, I'm trying to hurry. Person key, I'm just going to randomly choose somebody. let's do our new person. Then we need not a dot. Let's do just grant type 1, which I think is food. So the explanation, we're going to ask for $300 because that's above the amount. And the reason why they want $300 is they're hungry. How's that? All right, so do I have everything? Doesn't like, what did I leave out? Grant application does not exist.
Oh, you're missing a T.
Oh,
Down a line.
grant application.
Next one.
Oh, grant application. Oh, I did it up in the thing too.
If you got
Grant application amount. So now I have to do this again. I don't think I have to do the trigger again because I just changed the underlying value. And that's because I spelled it wrong. If you didn't spell wrong, you don't have to. It still doesn't have it.
You have the grand key itself.
Grant type key. Wow. I should never hurry, right? Is there another place it's misspelled?
I think you need a second T in the one you just fixed.
For grant, like,
Two T's.
All right. It's a good thing you guys have the good eyes. All right, so it did work. Now, if I do select star from grant application, where grant application key, I guess I'll do select max. So that's way off. Screen. Extra in. Anything else I spelled wrong? I just want to see. It should have set the flag to true. Where is it?
All the way over, off the screen.
Oh, so it is. It did. It set it to true. And if we look at all of them, just select star from grant application. Whoa. Okay, come on. So they're all false, right? Except when we come all the way to the bottom, then it's true for that one that's over. And if I were to change this to 150, all right, so when we go here, it's false because it's not over the amount. So the trigger is working. So what you could do with a trigger like this is that you could go through and you could look for the flags for people that ask for more than the amount, the maximum amount allowed for that type. So that's the trigger. All right. Triggers are really useful. I'm still not sure why you got a recursion on that other trigger, but we'll look at it. That's everything. I'm going to copy this into the blog. All of this code is also in GitHub under the chapter stuff. There's one typo in it. I noticed where it ends with a colon instead of an X thing. So I'll copy all of this into the blog as well. And have a good day. We're about 5 minutes over. Oh, and it's all been videotaped too. Let me kill the